Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I'm Dan Scogan, your host for the Ag Innovation News Podcast. A reminder that guests on this podcast shed light on innovations in value-added agriculture, highlight important voices and work that's being done throughout the Minnesota ag sector, and educate the public about resources and organizations that support Minnesota agriculture. Today on the podcast, we welcome Allison Hohn. Allison is the Executive Director of Naturally Minnesota. Allison, welcome to the podcast, and let's just get started with some information on you. Share a little bit of your bio, your education, and your work experience, and let our listeners get to know you a little bit.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. Always a pleasure to have conversations with our friends at AURI. They're a deep collaborator and partner of ours. I'm Allison Hohn, Executive Director of Naturally Minnesota, formerly known as Grow North. We are a nonprofit that actually sits at the Home Center of Entrepreneurship at the Carlson School of Business at the University of Minnesota, and we are all about supporting food, ag, and natural product businesses. And so for us as an organization, that means we do about 40 or so events a year. A lot of it is around education and connectivity amongst founders to ensure they're getting the support that they need at each stage of their business. We also do experiential tours. We run what I would call a post-accelerator for companies in the 5 to 50 million revenue space that we do in partnership with AURI via MBold. And we also host a large annual gathering called Food Ag Ideas Week. But, it was an interesting journey for myself to get into this role. I'm actually a food scientist by trade. I spent over a decade doing pretty diehard product development for Land O'Lakes and then later at Target, helping launch own brands. But my love was really around how do I help people, support people. I coached club soccer for 10 years for girls age 8 to 16, loved seeing that mentoring, and supported accelerators at both Land O'Lakes and Target. And when I stopped coaching, I started consulting for a company based out of New York that was all around supporting startups. And when the role at Grow North opened up and I realized, hey, this is a chance to support the entire ecosystem of entrepreneurs, not just ones who can afford a consultant, which unfortunately is not a high percentage. I jumped at the chance and I've been enrolled for a little over 4 years now. It's been a great ride as we've transitioned from Grow North to Naturally, joined a national organization and continue to build out the ecosystem here in Minnesota.
I was going to ask you about the name change. That had something to do with kind of the business model, is that right?
We joined the Naturally Network, which started with Naturally Boulder 20 years ago. And as they continued to grow and support, they actually, when they stood Grow North up, they went and visited them and said, how do you build an ecosystem to support entrepreneurs? And they basically said, here's our playbook, take it and run with it, see what you can do. And that's how they stood Grow North up. And in the last 5 years, the Naturally Network actually, more chapters joined and the national organization got stood up and there's now 12 chapters across the country. So the beauty is that for us as an organization, we get to tap into some national resources, expertise, sponsorship dollars, things like that. But it's also a built-in avenue for local companies here to get exposure regionally and nationally and get some of that escape velocity and get access to those resources. So it's really opened up a lot of opportunity. We do Pitch Slam every year and the winner of our Pitch Slam competes against all the other chapter winners for more prizes and recognition. And so it's been a really wonderful way for us to step into the national spotlight. And what's great is they actually pursued us and recruited us because Minnesota offers such a unique vantage point with our deep ag roots here. So they loved that we're a top 5 ag producing state. Obviously we have almost 10 Fortune 500 companies in food and ag. We have resources like AURI that have been around for 20 plus years. And we just have a lot to offer from that value chain. And so there's been a lot of exciting things we're able to do as a chapter that other chapters are not, and kind of stay true to our Grow North roots, but provide those opportunities for people across the entire food and ag value chain.
Exciting work. One of the events that you mentioned is the annual Food Ag Ideas Week. Tell us a little bit about that. We want to spend most of our conversation today talking about that and what's on the agenda, but what is the event itself?
Food Ag Ideas Week, this is our 7th year of this event, and we kind of view it as a regional future food tech. In the past, it's really been an opportunity to bring the entire community and ecosystem together and talk about some innovation and exciting things happening up and down from on-farm, could be autonomy, could be indoor ag, could be alternative proteins, anything up and down that value chain. Hear the latest and greatest from not only local folks who are doing that work, but national people as well. However, this year we've actually pivoted slightly. And so I know it's rapidly approaching the one day of contents on Tuesday, October 8th. We do have shoulder events on the 7th and 9th, and I can get into a little bit of those. And AURI is also a got one of those partner events. But this year it's entirely focused on the regenerative ag ingredient value supply chain. And it's kind of spawned out of a regen farm tour we did at A-Frame Farms last year, where we had not only Luke the farmer talking about how he manages what he does, but we had all the partners in that value chain. So we had the processors, the certifying agencies, some of the measurement companies who talk about soil and water health improvements with regenerative practices, as well as the brands who are creating that market demand. And we realized how illuminating it was for attendees to see just how many pieces in cogs in the wheel it takes to be successful up and down that regen supply chain. And so this year at Food Ag Ideas, we'll again be starting on farm, and then we'll move into that kind of middle supply chain space so people understand, why is it more expensive? What are the premiums? How is tolling different? All of the things that can impact requiring identity preservation of those crops or those products. And then get into brands talking about how they've navigated that transition from conventional to regen. It's not an all or nothing. You can start with some hero ingredients. You can really ease your way in. And then ending with kind of the retailer and brand viewpoint on how do you build a brand that resonates? Organic created enough of a what's in it for me for consumers to pay that premium. Regen is still on that train of figuring out what that means. Is it around nutrient density? Is it other things? Is it, getting enough people behind it where price points start to come down a little bit and it's more accessible, but really understanding how to build a brand that resonates with consumers and that resonates on shelf in retailers. And we'll be opening with a keynote from Lundberg Family Farms, who are kind of the OGs in this space, and closing with a keynote from Sean Sherman talking about indigenous practices that are often the same or very similar to what Regen is using and the generations of knowledge that can be used to decolonize our food system.
So who can attend?
Oh, great question. I mean, the short answer is anyone and everyone. But the long answer is if you are in any way, shape, or form involved with the regenerative agriculture supply chain, if you are a farmer, a processor, in distribution, an ingredient company, a certifying agency, if you're doing work around measuring impact of regenerative practices, and especially if you are a brand or a retailer that wants to carry these types of regen products, or a brand that wants to start sourcing regenerative ingredients, that's really who we want at the table. It'll be a really, I think, wonderful day of content. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers and of folks who've been doing this work. But for those who are really in that space or are curious about regen, that's who we want to have set foot in the door that day.
And am I coming to a site, or can I be virtually attending, or what works best?
So you will be coming in person. Historically, coming out of the pandemic, we have often offered virtual attendees. However, the amount is always very low. And we know from what our own learnings of running events here coming out of the pandemic that impact is much higher in person. And so this is an in-person only event. It's in Minneapolis. So the one day of content is on that Tuesday, October 8th at the Machine Shop in Northeast Minneapolis. And then Monday, the 7th, there will be a farm tour of Tree Range Farms in Northfield and a panel all around scaling those types of practices. That event is actually open to the public. So if you're like, I don't need a full day of content, but I love, an adult field trip and you want an experiential tour, please do join us. We'll be taking a bus down from the metro. You can drive yourself if you'd like, but that'll be a great chance to walk around, get that farm tour, and then listen to those folks talk about how to scale those practices. And then probably one of the most exciting things happening is the evening of Monday, October 7th. We're having a networking event. However, it is going to be having attendees from 2 other conferences happening in town. So Reuters Transform Food and Bridge to Food Alternative Protein Innovation Summit are also happening in Minnesota that week. It's a heck of a week for food and ag innovation on a global scale. And attendees from all 3 will be at that event. So I would honestly encourage, if you are interested in anything up and down the food and ag value chain, that event itself is going to be worth it. So if you are attending one of those conferences, you get access to that networking event. It'll be a great opportunity to connect with folks and cross-pollinate. And then that Wednesday, 9th, the Good Acre is doing a partner event around emerging farmers and procurement and the different channels they can get into. They're a fabulous partner of ours. And then AURI is doing their own event on Kernza and brewing with a couple of panels and some tastings. That's a private event. So there's an entire slate of days of regen content for folks to tap into as they would like.
I think you touched on it earlier, Allison, but it's going to be a pretty diverse group in the audience as well. Who's going to be there watching and listening?
What's great is from the networking event standpoint, there are international and national leaders coming into town for these events. For Food Egg Ideas Week specifically, we actually have a lot of speakers coming in town from across the country. So it'll be a national audience in attendance. So it's not just the usual suspects that you would see at most networking events or things around town. Even though food and ag is an extremely large industry, it's Minnesota, right? So we always joke St. Small. It's about 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon to know everyone, but I'm excited about the prospect of bringing a lot of people in town who probably have not spent a lot of time here and don't realize all the assets we have in Minnesota to support the growth of their businesses. But what's great is a lot of production happening here with the Forever Green initiative at the U of M focused on regenerative crops and cover crops and things like that. We have so much right to win in this space. And at that evening reception, we'll have a couple of high profile speakers coming in to do that welcome. Some are a surprise, some are known that we've posted already, but it should be a really great time to get to network and hear some of the future thinking thoughts.
Well, I want to get into a few more specifics, especially on the October 8th event. Maybe have you dig into the agenda just a little bit deeper, but I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to the Ag Innovation News podcast presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. And today we're visiting with the Executive Director of Naturally Minnesota, Allison Hohn. Allison is talking about their annual event, the Food Egg Ideas Week, coming up October 7th, 8th, and 9th. So let's open up that agenda a little bit on the 8th. Allison, give me some of the highlights. What are you looking forward to?
We're kind of structuring the day to be very tactical and to kind of bookend with hope and inspiration and then a little bit of the reality check in between. So unlike previous years of Food Ag Ideas Week, where it's all come listen to innovation happening, what's the latest and greatest, we really want people to leave Food Ag Ideas Week with essentially a playbook of here's who I need to call, here's who I need to reach out to, here are the partners I need at the table to start converting my supply chain from conventional to regen. And so that's how we have selected speakers from up and down the day. And actually at the end of the day, we'll have kind of a stakeholder meet and greet. So for anyone who's attending and you've listened to all these people talk about the work that they do and how they play a role in that value chain, you'll get a chance to go connect with them at a tabling session and get their email, get their information, and leave with your Rolodex filled out. So if you are a brand, you can go home to your sourcing team and say, hey, I know who we need to call. I have the watchouts, the key takeaways that we need to know. A lot of those will already be in the program. We'll have space for people to take their own notes, but we really want this to be as educational and informational and importantly, actionable as possible for people in this space. We know it's going to take a much larger group of people to get the ball and the needle to move significantly as people pursue regenerative agriculture. But from highlights, Lundberg Family Farms has been in this business for decades. And so I'm excited to hear from their Chief Growth Officer, Suzanne Sengelman. We'll be talking about why now is the time to pursue this. And then there's nothing quite like hearing the challenges and the opportunity from the people doing the work. So we have an incredible group of farmers that will open up the day. We'll hear from some of the key partner orgs immediately. Who are the people who are doing this work and that you should know, which include Mad Markets or Rodale, ROA, those type of folks. But we want it to be clear. We don't want to hide any of this information. We'll also have a highlight reel of some local innovation that's happening. We'll have Catherine Chute from the Forever Green Initiative talking about what they've been working on. Sue Marshall from Net Zero talking about upcycling with Kernza. So that's a great case study. And then Beth Robertson Martin from Merge Impact talking about some of the measurement as you get into how do you measure the impact of changing these practices. So there's going to be a lot of inspiration and information that's going to come along with this day. But I think the reality checks for people is that regen is hard. There are risks. It takes a lot of time to do this. This isn't just you call up your ingredient supplier and they say, oh yeah, I can get that for you. Nope, that's not how it works. Sometimes it takes a year or two to get into a farmer's crop rotation to grow these ingredients for you or produce them for you. So that's why we really want it to be a realistic picture of what does it take and who those partners are. And so that's kind of the middle reality check. But I'm excited to also hear from retailers at the end of the day, like Whole Foods will be in town for this. Frontier Foods, which is both a co-op retailer and ingredient supplier. Spins, which does data analysis, will be bringing the data angle of what they're seeing in market and how people are actually purchasing their dollars and what's resonating. So it's really going to be an action-packed day. I'm really excited. And again, if you have any involvement in the regen supply chain, come join us on Tuesday, October 8th.
Sounds great. And when I went to your website, you have some very great partners who are helping pull this all together. Do we get a chance to hear from them in some way?
Yeah, We'll have folks from General Mills on here. Some other locals that will be around include Doubting Thomas Farms in Moorhead. Noreen Thomas is an incredible founder on the west side. John Strophus from Field Theory, which has been doing a lot of work in this space. Saranda, an ingredient company that's local. So there's a lot of incredible partners up and down that value chain who are players here who also are supporting this work on a national scale.
Is there still time to get registered?
Oh, yes, you can register up until the day before. But since it is in person, depending on where you're located, I would encourage you to register as soon as you can and make travel plans. Again, I would highly encourage, if you are interested in attending, to make sure you can attend that Monday evening networking event. So you'll want to be in town for that. And that farm tour is that afternoon on Monday. So really, you want to block off that Monday, Tuesday to attend. But if you can only make it to the Tuesday event, you can even register that morning and walk in. We really want people to get access to this information and hear the messages that are being shared.
You mentioned at the beginning that every year the theme is a little different. Does anything come to mind, an actionable item that somebody's taken the initiative to run with and it's percolated to the surface that individuals or organizations have tried to expand on coming out of the Food and Ag Ideas Week?
At FAI last year, one of our most interesting fireside chats was between Cargill's meat organization, their animal beef up sustainability organization, and one of the alternative protein institutes, talking about the future of protein, the sustainability of protein. And it was great because those two factions are often very much in opposition and they don't want to play nice together. But the point of the conversation was the reality that we're going to need both. We will need both sustainably raised animal protein as well as an assortment of sustainable alternative protein in order to feed the population and make sure we use our land wisely. And what's been great is Embold, that coalition that both AURI and Naturally Minnesota sit on, have kind of run with that concept and are building a sustainable protein hub here in Minnesota from more sustainably raised animal agriculture and the feed inputs to them, as well as alternative proteins, whether that is mycoprotein, insects, plant-based proteins, fermentation, anything up and down that area. And the accelerator I mentioned that we run, Bold Growth, in partnership with them, is actually focused entirely on sustainable protein this year. They have pivoted the focus of that program and that platform to support companies who are in that space. And so Embold has really taken a stance on owning that, knowing Minnesota has a right to win with our production, our partners, our supply chain are centrally located from a logistics standpoint in the country, and the production, everything we have here. And so that has been one that has meaningfully shifted in the past year. And we have actually opened up applications for international companies. So if anyone listening knows an international company that is dabbling in sustainable protein, applications are open until October 15th. You can check out Embold website, our website. I'm sure AURI has information on their website, but we'll be taking probably 2 companies in the 5 to 50 million revenue range to support that work. So that's been a really fabulous way to see concepts on stage come to life in meaningful ways.
Well, I've appreciated the conversation today, Allison, and I should give you a chance to plug Naturally Minnesota a little bit. So what else is going on at Naturally Minnesota that our listeners might be interested in?
FAI is about 12 or so events that we put together. So it is our largest undertaking during the year. But in November, we have 2 events for community members. One is a Women in CPG event we're doing in partnership with We Talks at the U, and we will have Dana Thompson, who was part of Awamni, the sous chef, and Natives, talking about her entrepreneurial journey and the brand that she has just started. You don't have to be a woman, but if you want to attend that, it'll be open to both students, anyone in the community, entrepreneurs, basically anyone up and down that food value chain again that are interested in connecting, listening to her story, networking. It'll be a great day of connecting on that. And that's on November 13th. And then on November 20th, this is geared more towards CPG brand founders. We'll be having a day of education around trade spend. For those who don't know, trade spend is if you go to the grocery store and you see something's on sale, on promotion, the brand itself is paying for that discount. And so in order for brands to be successful and get new people to try, they often have to have a pretty robust trade spend program. So we'll be doing education around what that means. How do you get into it? How do you manage it? And how do you build that out for your 2025 budget? Because behind your cost of goods sold or the inputs into your product, trade spend is the second largest expense. So people often don't realize how important it is to have a good handle on that. So that's on 11/20. And then if you're like, hey, I just want to come network and have a good time, shamelessly, our holiday happy hour will be December 12th. And we'll have a greater Minnesota theme. So there will be companies who we will be having come in town from greater Minnesota with great giftable products to sample and maybe sell. So if you want to come get some stocking stuffers or some holiday gifts, do that. But the whole goal of that happy hour is really just connection across the broad ecosystem. So it is founders and entrepreneurs, it is government folks, nonprofit folks, investors, service providers, agencies, brand marketing, basically anyone and everyone up and down the food, ag, and natural products ecosystem. And we do one large networking event like that a quarter. So we're excited to have that be the finale for the year. And if you haven't been to a holiday happy hour, you should definitely join. If you have been, you know how fun they are. It's really nice for everybody to kind of let loose.
All good stuff. Where can I go to register or get more information about the Food Ag Ideas Week?
You can go to our website if you want as a starting point, naturallyminnesota.org, or you can go to foodagagideas.com. That's a standalone website completely focused on the conference. And you can get the entire rundown of the event, see all of the sessions, all of the speakers involved, and register through that. And we hope to see you there in just under a week.
Thanks for your time today, Allison. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate the chance.
We've been visiting today with Allison Hohn, the Executive Director of Naturally Minnesota, inviting you to come to the annual Food Ag Ideas Week coming up in early October. I want to thank you for joining us today and for listening to the Ag Innovation News Podcast presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. Thanks to my podcast crew, Lisa Martinez, AURI Communications Manager and Editor of this production. To learn more about AURI, go to auri.org.